This is a new podcast from Alpha Business Media. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into a really critical question about Nepal's Generation Z. Are they kind of a lost generation, forced by circumstance to leave? Or are they actually the architects building a new digital Nepal from the ground up? And this matters a lot because Nepal has this massive youth bulge. Get this, 52% of the population is between 7 and 24 years old. Think about Kathmandu. It's this incredible mix, right? Ancient temples next to buzzing IT startups. You've got these huge digital opportunities, but they exist alongside some really deep-seated political and economic problems.
Exactly. And our goal here, our mission for this deep dive, is really to pull out the key insights from the sources we've looked at. We want to get a handle on the values, the career hopes, and the social clout of these young Nepalists. And understanding this generation, it isn't just about Nepal. It's a fascinating case study. It could genuinely change how we think about global labor markets, maybe even consumption patterns, because you have the government with these big plans, right? Good governance, social justice, and prosperity, they call it. But then there's the reality on the ground. Constant political instability, serious structural economic issues. It's a tough backdrop for anyone.
Okay, right. So let's unpack this lost generation idea first. For many young Nepalists, leaving the country isn't some emotional decision. It sounds like a pretty logical response to a system they see as broken. So looking at the sources, what are the core reasons? What's pushing this huge outflow of, human capital?
It's really a tangled web. Going back decades, you've got this history of chronic political instability. Governments change constantly. Corruption is widespread. And there's this sort of political paralysis. And that's not just theoretical. It has real impacts, like consistently low use of capital expenditure budgets, money set aside for development. It often just doesn't get spent. So projects stall, jobs aren't created. It's about institutional weakness, really, a lack of accountability. And then there's Nepal's tricky geopolitical spot, balancing India and China. That can lead to economic shocks, like trade blockades, making things even harder internally. Domestically, the economy itself is, struggling. Foreign direct investment, FDI, it's low. There's a big gap between what's promised and what actually arrives. The industrial sector is pretty stagnant. And the whole economy is worryingly dependent on money sent home by migrants just to balance the books, to cover this huge trade deficit.
Wow, that's a pretty grim picture of just systemic failure, isn't it?
Yeah.
But besides those big economic and political forces, was there anything specific, like an event that really shaped this generation's view, maybe pushed them towards looking elsewhere?
Oh, absolutely. The 2015 earthquake. That was a hugely formative event for Gen Z there. Many were kids, teenagers. And it wasn't just the awful death toll, nearly 9,000 people, or the destruction. It was how the earthquake starkly revealed the weakness of the state, its inability to cope effectively. That experience likely fostered a deep pragmatism in this generation and, a real mistrust in the system's ability to actually provide for their future. It wasn't just about immediate aid. It was more fundamental, like, can we rely on these structures? For many, the answer seemed to be no.
Okay, so you have this tough economic situation, this lack of faith in institutions. How does that then translate into the ways young people are leaving? Are there different kinds of migration happening?
Yes. Definitely. Two really distinct flows, and both drain the country, but in different ways. First, there's labor migration. This is the big one, the most visible. In 2022-23, they issued a record 771,327 work permits for Nepalists to go abroad, the main driver. Just a lack of decent jobs at home, not being able to earn a living wage. And it's often exploitative. People pay huge fees, like an average of 137,000 Nepalese rupees, often borrowed, for jobs that are frequently described as dirty, dangerous, hard. Mostly in the Gulf states, Malaysia. And here's a key stat. 74.5% of those leaving are classified as unskilled workers. So it's a massive drain on the country's physical workforce.
771,000. That's just a staggering number. And the exploitation part is really troubling. What's the second main flow you mentioned?
The second is educational migration. It's maybe less obvious up front, but the impact is just as significant, maybe more so long term. Over the last 10 years, they've issued over 639,000 no objection certificates, NOCs, for studying abroad. Now, officially it's for education, but frankly, many see it as a one-way ticket. Students heading to places like Australia, Japan, Canada, the UK, they often don't plan on coming back. They feel Nepal doesn't offer the future they want. And this represents a huge drain of intellectual capital. Future leaders, innovators, gone.
Right. So pulling that lost generation thread together, it really sounds like migration isn't about disloyalty at all. It's a rational choice, a considered decision made by people looking at their reality, the instability, the lack of jobs, low pay, the memory of institutions failing them. They feel the system hasn't given them good enough reasons to stay. That feels like a crucial point. The issue isn't the youth, it's the environment. Okay, but let's shift gears. Because despite that challenging picture, the sources also paint this other, more hopeful narrative. Nepal's Gen Z, they're not just sitting back, right? They're using global digital connections to build something new, almost bypassing the old problems. This is where it gets really interesting, I think.
Absolutely. They are true digital natives. That's their edge. Internet use in Nepal has shot up over 51% penetration now. And mobile broadband connections, over 42 million. That's actually more than the population. Now, there's still a digital divide. Urban versus rural, we need to acknowledge that. But connectivity in cities like Kathmandu, it's strong. Perfectly good for a globally connected workforce. This digital literacy, it's their biggest asset. It's the foundation of this whole architect's idea.
And they're building a new economy on that foundation, like genuinely changing things.
They really are. The IT services sector is booming. It's the engine, you could say. A 2022 report found the IT services export sector was worth $515 million, and it grew by an incredible 64.2% in just 1 year. Think about that scale. Over 100 companies, nearly 67,000 freelancers involved. And listen to this, 83.5% of them are young, aged 20 to 29. This isn't small change either. It's already 1.4% of Nepal's GDP, its total economic output, and 5.5% of foreign currency reserves. And it's not just IT. There's a really vibrant startup scene, e-commerce like Kathmandu, Deal, waste management innovation with Khaleesi, fintech like Isiwa, Kalti. Young people are driving this, absolutely. The government's noticing too. They've launched a youth startup program. They're even talking about an IT decade, aiming for $3 trillion in IT exports and 1.5 million jobs. Ambitious, but it shows recognition. Oh, and don't forget the green frontier. Nepal's massive hydropower potential, maybe 45,000 milliW, is economically viable. Plus a growing carbon credit market. Look at that $45 million World Bank deal. These are knowledge-based industries, perfect for this skilled generation.
That IT surge is stunning. It really suggests two completely different economic worlds coexisting for young Nepalese. Can you maybe contrast those two paths more directly? Lay out the differences for us.
Yeah, let's do that because the contrast is stark. Okay, path 1. Work abroad, Gulf Malaysia, the main sector. Construction, cleaning, unskilled labor usually. Path 2. IT sector in Nepal. Software development, IT services, maybe business process outsourcing. Skills needed. Path 1. Mostly unskilled. Remember that 74.5% figure. Path 2. Highly skilled programming, AI, cloud stuff. Cost to get the job. Path 1. Really high. That average 137,000 rupees fee is huge. Path 2. Low or zero cost, especially with online freelance platforms. Okay, money. Approximate monthly salary. Path 1. Maybe 30,000 to 50,000 rupees, often unstable. Path 2, way higher. Think 120,000 up to 350,000 rupees or even more. Working conditions. Path 1, often exploitative. That dirty, dangerous, hard description keeps coming up. Path 2, flexible, often remote, focused on goals and the impact on Nepal. Path 1 brings in vital remittances, yes, but with high social costs, families separated, etc. Path 2 generates high-value exports, domestic spending, tax revenue inside Nepal.
Wow, seeing it side by side like that really hammers home the difference. And this leads to that fascinating idea. The sources mentioned digital migration as a kind of third way. It's like this generation is rewriting the rules of staying versus leaving.
Exactly. That old binary leave or stay, it just doesn't capture the full picture anymore. This IT boom has created this other option. Stay physically in Nepal, but work remotely for a foreign company, earn a global level salary. That's digital migration. And these people, they aren't lost at all. You could argue they're some of Nepal's biggest economic assets right now. They bring in foreign currency directly without the social disruption of leaving. Even the government seems to be catching on, considering a digital nomad visa. It suggests they're starting to grasp this new reality. It shifts the whole conversation away from just brain drain to something more complex, like a circulation of talent and money.
Okay, this is fascinating. But to really get the full picture of Nepal's future, we need to understand Gen Z's mindset, right? How does living this digital life shape, well, everything? How they shop, how they engage politically?
It shapes almost everything. Their consumer habits are heavily influenced by global platforms, TikTok, Instagram, you name it. They rely a lot on social media, what their peers say, influencers, when deciding what to buy, whether it's food or fashion. So no surprise, e-commerce is exploding. Digital payments are up like 210% per year, mostly driven by young people. But here's the interesting bit. It's not just mindless buying. Nepali Gen Z seems to really value authenticity, transparency, social responsibility. They'll actually pay more for brands that are eco-friendly or ethical. And they use social media to call out companies for greenwashing, for example. It's a kind of consumer paradox. They embrace global trends but filter them through their own values. For businesses, your story, your ethics, they matter just as much as your product now.
And this digital power, it extends beyond buying things, doesn't it? The sources mentioned some really powerful youth-led activism.
Oh, absolutely. For Gen Z, these digital platforms aren't just shops, they're the new town square, a place for activism. Online youth activism has become a serious political force in Nepal. Think about movements like hashtag Occupy Blue Water against gender violence, or hashtag Enough Eyes Enough protesting government COVID actions. These started online but spilled into the streets, mobilizing thousands, putting real pressure on the government. This kind of activism directly challenges the old ways of doing politics. It makes society more democratic, even while the government might try to clamp down with social media laws. Their digital skills have basically become political capital. They can organize fast, spread information, bypass the traditional media gatekeepers. It's the architect's idea again, but playing out in the civic space. Real agency.
And it sounds like these digital natives are also changing expectations inside Nepal's workplaces, too, when they do work locally.
Yes, significantly. When Gen Z joins the domestic workforce, they bring totally different expectations, heavily influenced by the whole post-pandemic shift in thinking about work. They prioritize things like work-life balance, mental health support, flexible hours. It's not just about clocking in and out. They're goal-focused. They want meaningful work, they want to feel their contribution matters, and they want the company's values to align with theirs. They expect clear career paths, but flexible ones, and ongoing chances to learn and grow. It's about being valued for skills and output, not just presence.
So connecting back to the brain drain issue,
Yeah.
it's clearly not just about the money, as it goes much deeper.
Exactly right. It's not just about salary differences. It's also very much about a mismatch in culture and values. To attract and keep this generation, companies in Nepal and really globally need to shift away from old school hierarchies towards cultures based on agility, transparency, purpose, employee well-being. It's a whole different way of thinking about employee engagement. The work environment itself is a huge factor in whether they stay or go.
So wrapping this up, Nepal's Gen Z, they aren't simply lost or simply architects. They embody both, living this intense duality. They navigate these two starkly different Nepals. One is the struggling physical economy pushing them away. The other is this rising digital economy pulling them in or letting them stay connected globally from home. So what should someone listening take away from this? Thinking about the future of work, global talent, even how societies change.
Well, Nepal's future really feels like it hangs in the balance on the choices these young people make every day. Do they take the established path out or bet on building something new at home? For policymakers, the message is clear. Urgent reforms are needed. Education, investment rules, digital infrastructure make the architect path easier and more appealing than the exodus route. For investors, the opportunity is huge. Back this digital boom, support this entrepreneurial energy. It really makes you think, doesn't it? How does a country choose? Do you focus on just keeping your brightest physically in the country, or do you empower them to build new realities, even if those realities span the globe?
Yeah, absolutely. Nepal's future is actively being written right now in lines of code, in startup pitch decks, and hashtags. Whether this generation's story ends up being one of tragic loss or maybe triumphant creation, it really depends on the choices Nepal makes next. And maybe just how much this incredibly connected generation can actually reshape the world around them. Definitely something to mull over until our next deep dive.